Hello, souls and demons. Tonight we have 2 stories centered around the night shift. So, sit back, grip your seats, and enjoy. The Night Shift, written by No Trains 123. I was never what you would call a night owl, more of a recluse. You see, I find comfort in my solitude. That's why the night shift appealed to me so much. There's something quite liberating about it. Something tranquil. It's almost as if you're in a parallel universe where everything just seems different. It's nice. I work as a night guard at my local shopping center. It's deep in the suburbs, so the only trouble I ever really come across is the occasional fox trying to get into the bins. I essentially just get paid to count the seconds down until 4 a.m., when my shift ends. There isn't much more to it. After all, a shopping center that's devoid of activity is a shopping center that's devoid of concern, right? Perhaps the only discouraging aspect of it are the mannequins. They terrify me. But unfortunately, in a dimly lit shopping center, they stick out like a sore thumb. There's nothing normal about some vacant imitation of a human. It feels like they look into you with a hollow glare which lingers in your mind before darting down the back of your spine. Their blank facade creates the impression of an unearthly human, a shadow of the people who occupy the center during the day. I know they aren't real, but I never feel truly alone when I'm in the presence of a mannequin. Hell, I swear I've even seen one move once. Only in the corner of my eye, though. But I just put that to the darkness playing tricks on my mind. I've been doing this job for about a year now, and part of what mitigates my paranoia around the mannequins is the drive home. I'll often find myself on the road just as the sun starts to break the seal of the horizon. It's quite a beautiful thing to see the world waking up, especially after you finished your shift. It sort of indicates a revitalization, rebirth if you will. This customary moment of brief bliss is what alleviates any troubled thoughts I have. There's nothing like it. It's like my daily detox. But something happened on my drive home this morning. Something that has been etched into my mind like a tick. And the more I think about it, the more it infects me with fear. My night shift had just come to an end. I knew this because Oscar, the daytime security guard, had just arrived. I checked my watch. 3:56 a.m. Sunset was at 4:27 this morning, so I had just over 30 minutes of driving before I'd be rid of any distressing thoughts. I began to walk towards my car, tossing the master set of keys to Oscar as we crossed paths. To which he responded with an unenthusiastic thanks. He must have cycled to work, as my car stood alone in the desolate car park. It was situated directly underneath an overhanging street lamp, illuminated by its dull amber glow. Once I had gotten in the car, I eagerly rammed my keys into the ignition and resuscitated it, avid for the replenishing journey home. I glanced at the shopping center one last time to see Oscar smoking a cigarette by the main entrance, and I noticed that the fire exit was slightly ajar. We locked eyes for a moment. "The fire exit's open," I announced. He gestured his hand at me as if he was saying, "On it," and reluctantly turned towards the door, the ember of a cigarette playfully dancing with the motion of his hand. How hadn't I checked the fire exit? I decided to take the forest highway instead of my usual journey through the town. I had never taken this route before, but it had just been reopened after a year-long closure, so I figured why not? It's quite a scenic route anyway. 50 miles of thick forest split in two by a freshly pathed road. The sort of picturesque scene that you'd find on a postcard. The heart of the forest was dismal, with trees that towered over the road. I checked my watch. 4:08 a.m. Something didn't feel right. but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. There was a distinct aura that made me feel like I was in the shopping center. I don't know why. Maybe the trees reminded me of the mannequins, an inanimate unity that seemingly watches your every move. But it felt more like there was something about to happen. Whatever it was, it kept me vigilant, alert. The thought of a forced sunrise was far from my mind. It wasn't hot, but it was humid enough for a layer of mist to latch onto the tarmac and linger between the trees to either side of me. Almost as if it was waiting for something or someone. I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't unnerved. My knuckles were white at the wheel, but it was only 19 minutes until sunrise, and turning back would have just taken as long as continuing onwards. So I carried on, in heat of my thoughts. Maintaining a steady speed of 60 miles per hour, I diverted my attention to the broken yellow dashes in the road. It was quite satisfying, actually, to see vivid strikes of amber yellow come and go out of the beam of my headlights. As well as this, the road itself was incredibly smooth. This all comforted me, and for a moment I felt relieved. But unfortunately, this was short-lived. The forest had sinister plans for me. As I approached a fork in the road, my headlights suddenly deserted the car and I was engulfed in darkness. I slammed the brakes. Believe me, the last thing I wanted to do was stop, but I just couldn't carry on in the dark. When my car came to a halt, I was greeted with my paranoia. Quick breaths took over me, my pupils dilated. I could feel my heart pumping blood through every vein in my body. Slowly but surely. I loosened my grip on the wheel, unhinged my seatbelt and opened the car door. My feet met the tarmac and subsequently shifted the mist, leaving a marked circle of lucidity around them. The road felt hard yet fragile, like one big sheet of ice, and as my breath met the air it turned into a haze of mist, which eventually settled with the fog that loitered around me. Stepping out of the car was no easy task. I was practically hugging it as I approached the hood and popped it open. I glanced at my watch. 4:14 a.m. The sky was violet, with a hint of the sun in the horizon that tinted it with a deep azure. I stared at the labyrinth of mechanics before me and was overcome with distress. Nothing made sense. Frantically trying to breathe some life into the bulbs, I flipped unfamiliar switches and shook an array of tubes, but to no avail. I'm a security guard, not a mechanic, after all. I remember toying with the idea of walking the rest of the route, but who was I kidding? There was no way I was going to do that. It can't have been that long before I heard it. It came from the forest, the all too familiar sound of footsteps. They were moving at an irregular pace, snapping twigs and crunching leaves with every step. I cautiously veered my eyes towards the sound to see what appeared to be the silhouette of a human, wandering within the dense forest. A human. Someone who could help me. Someone who could save me from this torturous experience. "Hey!" I called out, unsuccessfully. It just kept ambling on. "Hey! Help me!" I persisted, but it was apparent that it couldn't hear me. So I drastically walked towards it. From the vast open road, I stepped into the murky confined forest. There was about 30 yards between us, which I was closing with a steady stride. Despite the sea of trees that limited me from doing so, I kept on calling out again and again, but it would not stop walking away from me. It was clear that it just hadn't heard me yet. Edging closer, another sound accompanied the footsteps. A muffled voice. It was unintelligible, but it sounded familiar. Like the voice of someone that I knew, yet I couldn't make out any words, let alone who it was. It got to the point where I was within 10 feet of it, close enough for me to call out to it and be heard. "Hello?" It immediately stopped. There was a subsequent flood of silence which was as thick as the mist around us. It filled my ears with alarm, which unearthed the rhythmic pulse of my heart. The thing in front of me was lifeless. It was chalk white, from head to toe, with limbs that were freakishly slender, fork-like fingers hanging off the ends of its arms. With a stiff motion, it rotated its head to reveal a face, or what was left of one. It had no mouth, no nose, no eyes, no ears. Instead, there was just a smooth facade of a head, the ghost of a face. There was a moment where it was just looking at me, like a lion observing its prey. Somehow, despite the lack of eyes, I could feel its empty glare latching onto me. It was both immobilizing and hypnotic. I was transfixed. The glare soon became a beam, as two openings of light appeared where its eyes should have been. They were like headlights, to which I was just a deer in them. The harsh light burrowed into my skull and made its way through my spine. It was less painful than it was stimulating, but I was overcome by it all as it began to spread to every pore in my body. I could see the thing was right in front of me. It was expressionless, but I could also feel it tunneling through me. It settled in my chest, an erratic form of energy that felt like a ball of lead. Beyond the beam of light that coated my vision, I could see the thing's face beginning to shift and stir. It was morphing. Two holes appeared in the center of its head, followed by a pointed mount which shaped them into nostrils, a nose. Then, like the slash of an open wound, a slither of red materialized below it, a pair of ruby lips. The outline of ears started to emerge from the sides of its head. They grew like tumors, both deformed and unpredictable. What was in front of me was the culmination of a face. It looked hauntingly similar, but the light shone too bright for me to infer anything. I must have been debilitated in this trance for about 15 minutes, as the sun finally surfaced from its slumber. This could only mean one thing. 4:27 a.m. Sunlight seeped through the trees like honey, decorating the mist and painting the trucks with a pastel amber color. It eventually reached us, casting a layer of illumination onto the thing's face, subsequently shattering the beam of light which had me in its tenacious trance. All that was left was an outline of its ray, a remnant which glimmered in the morning sun. In due course, my lucidity returned to me. The sunlight had revealed a pair of hazel green eyes and a mop of greasy black hair that was perched on top of its head. Everything became so clear, so obvious. The face that I had just watched morph into existence was mine. I gravely searched for a hint of delusion, but instead was met with the daunting truth. It was me. The thing opened its mouth. "Hello," it proclaimed, with a voice that was an echo of my own. It resonated in my ears, almost taunting me, the discomfort of unwanted familiarity. The moment of revelation had disentombed my adrenaline. I did the only thing that I could think of. I ran, leaping in bounds over the terrain of the forest floor. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I emerged from the forest with the mobility of a newborn fawn, my legs staggering in a frantic attempt to escape what I had just encountered. It didn't take long to reach my car, but when I got there, I instinctively closed the bonnet and scrambled into the seat. The car was turned on, and lo and behold, the headlights glistened onto the irradiated tarmac. There was no time to muse on this. I hit the gas and sped off, but my curiosity besieged me to peer at the thing as I drove past it. It hadn't moved. It just followed me with that hollow glare, staring at me with my own eyes, wearing my face like a mask. This brings me to the present moment. I've been glued to my bed all day, as paralyzed as I was in the forest, watching morning descend into evening. I can't think straight. I just keep on seeing its face, my face. I'm haunted by my own visage. The night shift is slowly approaching and I found myself staring into the face of uncertainty. All I know is that it's out there. I'm out there. And I don't know what I'm going to do. All right. What did you think about that last story? Pretty creepy, huh? Well, this next one is actually also named The Night Shift, but it's written by getyaisha. So, let's get started. About a year ago, I decided to change my life. For the most part, I spent my young adulthood as a screw-up. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't get religion and become a Bible thumper. I just chose to lead the street life. I recently got a job as the night clerk at a small convenience store, not a bad gig as jobs go. The pay is shit and the hours suck, but I wanted to start on my new life, and it honestly felt great. My name is Troy. I live in a small town just outside of Houston. I moved here to get away from the things that got me into trouble. If I knew then what I know now, I would have stayed where I was. My first night on the job, I met Shelly. She had been on the night shift for about 2 months. She was training me to take her spot because she was quitting. There wasn't much to learn. About halfway through, we stepped out front for a smoke. Shelly took a long drag off her cigarette and then turned to me with a serious look on her face. Exhaling a cloud, she sighed. Look, there's some things you need to know. First, there's a gun under the counter. I've never had to use it, but better safe than sorry. Secondly, and I can't stress this enough, never leave the store unlocked. And last but most importantly, strange things happen here after 3 a.m. Just be careful. At first I thought she was trying to spook me, but the look on her face was sincere. I had to ask, what do you mean by strange? She shook her head and chuckled before tossing out her cigarette. Good luck. She pulled her keys from her pocket and started walking away. Wait, you're leaving? She turned and looked at me. Yep, you're on your own. I watched as she got in her car and pulled out of the parking lot, speeding away. I was alone. The silence was overwhelming, the type of quiet that makes you feel like you're the last person on Earth. Inside wasn't much better. The buzzing of the lights and low hum of the freezer broke up the silence, but it was still boring as hell. I watched videos on my phone and played Clash of Clans to pass the time. This store sits on a long stretch of highway between 2 neighborhoods. There's a few other storefronts, but this was the only gas station for about 10 miles. There were a few customers, but for the most part it stayed quiet. Around 1:30, a car flew into the parking lot. The headlights were blinding. The asshole must have just had his high beams on. I heard the car door slam and saw the shadow pass quickly before he was at the door. He wasn't dressed like the people I'd seen through the night. He was wearing a suit and tie. He seemed agitated. Moving through the store, he zipped down the aisle, grabbing something off the shelf, then stopped at the freezer and pulled a bottle of water before making his way to the front. He placed the water in a box of aspirin on the counter, then asked for a pack of Marlboro Reds while dropping a 20. As I was handing the smokes over, he asked if he could just use the restroom. I pointed it out and he took off, leaving his items and cash on the counter. He was in there for a while before he burst through the door and ran out of the store. Hey, what about your stuff? It was too late. He was in his car and speeding out of the lot. I avoided the sale, put the cash in my pocket, and went to put the stuff back on the shelf. Just as I was about to put the water back in the cooler, I heard a phone ring. It was coming from the restroom. I paused for a second. Shelly's voice replayed in my head. Strange things happen here. I guess she wasn't lying. I made my way to the restroom just as the phone stopped ringing. When I went in, I didn't see it at first. I checked the stalls and the sink, but I couldn't find it. The phone rang again. It was coming from the trash can. I got this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. You know that feeling you get when something bad is about to happen? But I ignored it and looked in the can. There it was. The illuminated screen displaying the word unknown as I reached in and grabbed it. I wasn't going to answer it. It wasn't my phone. I took it back to the counter and placed it next to the register. I'd been back up for a while and the phone had been ringing the whole time. I finally turned the damn thing off, then at 3 o'clock on the dot, it rang again. I looked down at it to see my name as the caller. Now I was freaking out. I knew I had turned that phone off and my phone was right next to me. My heart dropped. What the fuck? I slowly picked up the phone, staring at the screen. Hell no, I thought, and put it down. A text came through on my phone a few seconds later. Answer me. Then, as if on cue, it rang again. My name and number flashed across the screen. So I picked up. Hello? There was a loud scream, then static before the line went dead. The lights in the store flickered and suddenly, there was a tall man standing in front of the counter. I fell back startled by whatever this was in front of me. His skin was pale, almost gray. His face was long and thin with oversized eyes that sat in dark, ringed sockets. There was no color to them, just white, with tiny black pupils. A sickening grin stretched across his face as he tilted his huge, bald head to the side. Then the lights flickered again and he was gone. I was frozen. This couldn't be happening. I had to be losing my mind. There was a tapping sound coming from the window to my right. I slowly turned my head to see him outside peeking in at me. That twisted grin, revealing rotten, crumbling teeth as he tapped a long, bony finger on the glass. A car flew by on the highway, and as the light faded away, he vanished. I stood there in shock. I didn't snap out of it until another car came flying into the lot. I looked down at my phone, and it was 1:30. I couldn't breathe. It was the same guy from before. He did the exact same thing, right down to running out of the store. This time I ignored the ringing phone, and the night passed with no problems. When my shift was over, I clocked out and made the long walk home. By the time I got there, I was exhausted. I took a shower and fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, that phone was on my chest, and once again my name and number were on the screen. I grabbed it and rushed over to the front door, flinging it open. I threw that thing as far as I could. As soon as I closed the door and turned around, I was back in the store. My first reaction was to get the hell out of there. The chimes sounded as the door slid open behind me. I spun around and froze. I was staring at the highway. I rubbed my eyes and shook my head. This couldn't be real. I stepped back nervously, scanning the store for any sign of the tall man, but there was no one there. I slowly got back behind the counter, and after a few minutes a customer walked in. It was a girl. She looked way too young to be out here alone this time at night. She was wearing blue jeans and an oversized t-shirt. She smiled and spoke in a cheerful tone. "So, you're the new night shift guy. Where's Shelly?" It took me a second to respond. She quit. Her expression changed for a second, then she smiled and hopped up, taking a seat on the counter. "My name is Hope. I come here to hang out when things get crazy at home. I usually wait here till Dad passes out, then sneak back into the house. Is it cool?" I felt sorry for her, but besides that, having the company might take the edge off all the crazy shit that had been going on all night. So I let her stay. The rest of the night was calm. The girl eventually left and I finished up, clocking out when the next shift came in. It was my second night on the job, and it took everything in me not to quit. I didn't think I could take another night, but I needed the money. And I really didn't have much of a choice. I showed up at my usual time, clocked in, and waited for my shift to start. I stood outside watching traffic zoom by on the highway, wondering if the tall man would be showing up and if Hope would come by to keep me company. A car pulled up. Some random guy got out and passed by me going in the store. As he walked in, he was whistling a tune that caught my attention. It was the ringtone from that phone. My heart dropped. I started sweating and mouth went dry. I turned to look at him, but he was gone. I spun back around to get a look at the car. There was nothing there. Shit. It's starting early tonight. It wasn't long before I was alone in the store. It was a busy night. The place was jumping till about 10:30. That's when the silence crept in. No cars on the highway, no one coming in. It was dead. I made my rounds emptying trash cans and restocking a few items that had run low. I locked the front doors, then took the trash out back to the dumpster. Once I got back inside, I heard a sound. Thump, thump, thump. I froze for a second, listening. After all, I had been through the night before. I didn't think I could take any more. I charged into the lobby, ready to confront whoever or whatever was making that sound. But when I saw who it was, I paused. It was Hope. I let my guard down. "What are you doing here?" She smiled. "I came to see you, silly." I walked past her and unlocked the door, and in that second it hit me. The door was locked. How did she get in? I thought about it and turned around, but instead of questioning her, I decided to play it out. "I'm going out front for a smoke. You coming?" Hopping down off the counter, Hope followed me out into the parking lot. I lit up a cigarette and looked over at her. She had to be 15, maybe 16 years old, but there was something off about her that I hadn't noticed before. "So, Hope, how long have you lived around here?" She smiled. "Oh, I've always lived here." A car playing loud music pulled into the lot. I thumped my cigarette away and went back to my station. Hope came in and went to the restroom. 4 people got out of the car, 2 guys and 2 girls. Laughing and talking, they came in grabbing snacks and beer. When they got to the counter, the lights flickered and there he was behind them. It happened so fast I could barely react. He touched one of the girls and she withered instantly, turning to skin and bones before dropping to the floor. The others screamed and tried to run. They didn't get far. I reached for the gun under the counter, but before I could fire a shot, it tackled one of the guys to the ground and crushed his skull. There was a loud, wet crunch as blood and brains splattered across the floor. The other 2 made a break for the car, but in the blink of an eye, it was there. I ran for the back door. I could still hear them screaming as I burst into the alley and took off running towards the closest neighborhood. I ran looking for a place to hide. I finally spotted an open garage and ducked inside, praying that thing wouldn't find me. I don't know how long I was there before I felt the barrel of a gun pressed against the back of my head and heard a man's voice. "The cops are on the way. You picked the wrong house to break into, shithead." When the police arrived, I was arrested. I told them about the phone and what had happened, but they didn't believe me. The bodies of 4 local teenagers were found at the store. According to the security footage, I pulled a gun from under the counter and shot 2 of them, before chasing the others into the parking lot and gunning them down. I was eventually found unfit to stand trial and committed to an insane asylum. It's not all bad, though. Hope comes to visit me every night. She tells me the tall man will be coming for me soon, but the joke's on him. I'll be long gone when he gets here. I slipped the noose I made from my bedsheets around my neck, climbed up on my bed and tied the other end to the rafters. Taking one last deep breath, I looked around the room and stepped off.